First, we will hear from a group of scholars from the Global Division of the Church History Department. We'll hear from Jared Feller, Grace Stephenson, Jeremy Talmage, and Scott Christensen, and they will be discussing documenting Mormonism as a global religion.
The rapid worldwide growth of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has made the scriptural mandate to keep a record continually of all important things that transpire in Zion increasingly difficult to accomplish. This task of documenting an ever-unfolding history on a global scale has long been a prime concern of Church History Department leadership. As the need and urgency to document international Mormonism increased, efforts were hampered by a small staff, limited resources, and language and cultural barriers. Church History Department leadership was also aware of the need for local members to document their own history and tell their own stories from their own unique perspectives. Adding to the complexity were questions of how and where to store and appropriately preserve this ever-increasing collection. With the advent of new technologies, including computers, digital imagery, and the internet, a vision for collecting and housing records locally while sharing the information worldwide began to develop. Over the years, this vision took shape and culminated in a model that decentralized church history efforts. On January 19, 2010, the First Presidency approved the model for decentralizing church history, stating that, quote, "The Church History Department will ensure that international church history work follows a decentralized model, with area presidencies providing leadership and resources, and the Church History Department providing support and training." 2 years later, the First Presidency also approved the decentralization of church history work in North America. This validated ongoing efforts to decentralize and pointed to the partnership between area presidencies and the Church History Department as the key to its success. Accordingly, the two sides, area presidencies and Church History Department leadership, began meeting regularly in Salt Lake City around general conferences to facilitate the coordination and implementation of church history initiatives in each area. This photograph, taken in 2010, shows the Brazil area presidency seated on the left of the table, with the church historian and recorder at the time, Elder Marlon K. Jensen, seated at the head of the table, and Church History Department executives and leadership seated on the right side of the table. These meetings continue to provide area presidencies with an opportunity to report on the progress of church history efforts in their areas and to obtain professional advice on church history-related matters. In this decentralized model, and as stated in the First Presidency's directive, under the umbrella of the church historian and recorder, the areas provide leadership and resources, while the Church History Department provides support and training. Rather than dictating to area presidencies, the Church History Department instead works to support local initiatives that meet the area presidency's objectives. To accomplish this, area presidencies began calling men, women, and couples to serve as area church history advisors. Ideally, and whenever possible, these individuals are members of local congregations. Those called to serve in this newly created position coordinate all church history activities in their area. In large or linguistically diverse areas, individuals are also called to serve under the direction of these area church history advisors as regional and country church history advisors. In a few cases, area presidencies also establish church history committees and call individuals as church history specialists to assist with specific projects. So again, to clarify, we have area church history advisors, we have country church history advisors, regional church history advisors, and in some cases, church history specialists, kind of 4 different callings. The priorities set by the area presidency determine the size and complexity of each area's church history organization. Currently, there are nearly 200 church history advisors and specialists serving throughout the world. They come from various backgrounds and professions, and later in our presentation, we will introduce you to a few of them. In order to provide these church history advisors with support and training, and in line with the First Presidency's directive, a division within the Church History Department was created to implement the vision for decentralization that had developed over many years. The division was appropriately named Global Support and Training and initially consisted of only 2 employees, Wayne Crosby as its managing director and Matt Heiss, an international church history expert. In the subsequent years, this team has expanded and been renamed the Global Support and Acquisitions Division, though its size remains relatively small given its global responsibilities. Today, the Global Support and Acquisitions Division consists of 15 full and part-time employees who are assisted by 48 full and part-time church service missionaries. Perhaps the team's most significant accomplishment has been the creation, publication, and worldwide implementation of a series of training materials called Church History Guides. They constitute the foundation of the division's support and training efforts by providing simple instructions for those called to do church history work. To date, 7 guides have been published in 10 languages, with an additional 3 guides nearing completion. The titles of these guides are shown here to give you a sense of the scope of these efforts. These 2 guides, Stake, District, and Mission Annual Histories and Oral Histories, are foundational to each area's church history plans and are generally the starting point for newly called advisors. The application of digital technologies to both of these programs enables them to be easily transferred and stored. We'd like to have Grace Stephenson and Jeremy Talmage, employees in the Global Support and Acquisitions Division, briefly share with us the results of the division's efforts to improve annual and oral history submission and the impact that these 2 guides have had. Grace.
One of the earliest and most concerted efforts of the Global Division has been to improve submission rates for annual historical reports. Annual histories are reports submitted yearly by, we hope, every stake, mission, and district of the church. The Church History Department began soliciting annual histories in their current format in 1978 as the rollbooks, meeting minutes, and other historical records maintained by local units through the 19th and 20th centuries were phased out. The annual historical report was intended to streamline and simplify record submission while fostering a culture of record-keeping in local congregations. Annual histories can give a picture of how the gospel is lived day in and day out around the world. The report's exact form and content varies considerably from unit to unit, but the key components remain the same: a copy of the unit's calendar, a record of members' callings, a brief narrative of key events, and perhaps some identified photographs of those events. Units may also add reports from quorums and auxiliaries, statistics, newsletters, programs, and the like. Because the annual history was already a functioning and familiar program well before the Global Division was formally organized, it was one of the first programs we put our efforts into improving and expanding. After a 7-year decline, submission rates bottomed out at about 50% worldwide in 2007, with serious lag in international areas. We have implemented 3 key strategies to improve those submission rates. Our first strategy was to begin reporting annual history submission rates to area presidencies in 2007. This had an almost immediate effect. The submission rate for units in international areas rose from 43% in 2007 to 54% in 2008, and worldwide submission rates have continued to rise to about 2/3 for 2011 and 2012. Second, the division needed to educate local members about the purpose and content of annual histories. Many members simply do not know what they are. To fill that education gap, the Global Division published a comprehensive 17-page annual history guide in March of 2012, which has been translated into several languages and is intended for use by all local units around the world. Third, church history advisors encourage annual history submission. These local agents, like Celso and Cristina Sanchez of Brazil on the right, and Hee Chul-so of South Korea on the left, work through priesthood organizational channels to provide trainings for local leaders, historians, and clerks. They also maintain regular contact with those local units to acknowledge receipt, follow up with units whose submissions are overdue, and give feedback on report quality. All things, language barriers, and limited resources make it possible for church history library staff. Both Brother So and the Sanchez's have had significant success. For 2011 and 2012, they have achieved 100% submission rates for all stakes, missions, and districts in their countries.
On the appointed Sunday, a young man named McLean Kagwa hiked to the summit of Mount Nyambabwe to spend the day and night in fasting and mighty prayer in his personal search for religious truth. The following morning, weak and hungry, he made his way to the local market. But there he encountered the spiritual nourishment he yearned for. Kagwa proceeded to spend his savings on a book, a strange book published by a strange church he had never heard of. After reading the introductions to the Book of Mormon, the Pearl of Great Price, and Joseph Smith's history, he decided to pray to God to know if these writings were inspired. He describes what followed as a miraculous manifestation that God had sent him a sign. But accompanying this epiphany was also a profound sense of sorrow, once all his attempts to make contact with the church based far away in America had failed. It was a glorious day, Kagwa reports, with heavy tears rolling down his cheeks, when he recognized the name of the church emblazoned on a placard in his hometown. As incredible as this account is, there are equally marvelous events taking place behind the scenes, allowing the Church History Library to preserve and share this beautiful story of conversion and service. You see, Brother Kagwa lives deep within central Malawi and speaks Chichewa. Without our knowledgeable and talented country church history advisor, Gabriel Chinwe, seen on this slide, who recorded an oral history with him, Kagwa's tale most likely would never be shared outside his own village. The church's oral history program has been instrumental in preserving the testimonies and memories of faithful members for over 4 decades now. However, the recent decentralization of church history has exponentially enhanced the church's ability to document people, events, and stories. This in turn has resulted in a massive expansion to the oral history program beyond the confines of the Salt Lake Valley. You can see in this graph the dramatic increase in oral histories performed by area church history advisors. In 2013 alone, these 463 interviews were conducted in 46 countries in 24 languages by 74 different church history advisors. Particularly in the areas of the world where there is not an established culture of record keeping, oral histories capture first-hand accounts about foundational events. They are also especially effective at documenting the history of underrepresented demographics, allowing the Church History Library to formulate specific initiatives to better understand the experiences of these minority members. Finally, area, country, and regional church history advisors allow the Church History Library to record the ramifications of important world events from the perspective of Latter-day Saints. In November 2013, as the deluge of Super Typhoon Haiyan washed away almost everything in its path, our Philippine area church history advisor, Millie Gapiz, was on the scene, interviewing missionaries and members, recording the trauma and aftermath of this devastating natural disaster. Her interviews provide an unprecedented glimpse into the preparation, inspiration, and miracles that saved many lives.
These 2 guides, Stake District and Mission Annual Histories and Oral Histories, are foundational to each area's church history plans and are generally the starting point for newly called advisors. In areas where church history advisors have experience with these guides, they are now also beginning to collect records and artifacts. To better meet the needs of the worldwide church, these records and artifacts are now being stored at authorized records preservation centers around the world, which provide a relatively safe, secure, and carefully controlled environment for long-term storage. Ideally, records preservation centers are established in church-owned buildings. The size of the storage space depends on the area's collecting plans. As shown here, Argentina has quite a large records preservation center. This is a picture of the records preservation center located in Germany, and an example of a small records preservation center in Taiwan. Records preservation centers are not open to the public. However, digital capabilities will eventually allow these records to be shared globally through the online Church History Library catalog. Excuse me. Today there are 15 records preservation centers operating throughout the world. Additionally, a network of church history centers is being established to provide public access to original records. These centers will also offer services such as assisting researchers and receiving donations. Church history centers will enable records and artifacts to remain in the regions where they originated and have deeper meaning to the local population, while digitization will eventually ensure their global availability online. Currently, there are church history centers being developed in Brazil. You can see here they're displaying both records and artifacts as well. In South Africa, this area designated for research. and also in New Zealand. The flagship Church History Center will be located in Templeview, New Zealand, on the campus of the Old Church College. Planning and development are underway to preserve and repurpose part of the Mendenhall Library to accommodate a large Church History Center. Additional training materials have also been created to help church history advisors. Among these is a website specifically for advisors where they can access digital versions of the church history guides and countless other resources designed to assist them in every facet of their calling. In addition to the church history guides and the Church History Advisor website, each area church history advisor is assigned a first point of contact within the church history department that provides individualized and area-specific support and training. This point of contact maintains regular communication with the area church history advisor via phone, email, or video conference. At the request of area presidencies, the Global Support and Acquisitions Division occasionally travels to support area church history advisors as they conduct trainings, work on special projects, and organize church history seminars. Brother Charles Sonokori, the Africa West Area Church History Advisor, is photographed here conducting trainings in conjunction with Global Support and Acquisition staff. The two photographs on the right show him teaching others how to compile and submit annual histories. And the photo in the bottom left corner was taken during training on how to record and process oral histories. The photo in the top left corner was taken at the burial site of Joseph William Billy Johnson, who first organized LDS congregations in West Africa and is considered the father of the church in Ghana. These photographs were taken in 2012 during a Church History Advisor seminar in the Pacific. On the right is a photograph taken of the country church history advisors for Samoa, Tonga, Fiji, French Polynesia, and Australia, alongside members of the Global Support and Acquisition staff in front of the Apia Samoa Temple. On the left, area church history advisor Brett McDonald is pictured with these same advisors in Samoa during training on how to appropriately document church historic sites. And actually today as we speak, two of our colleagues are in the Africa Southeast area, assisting with training and seminars there. In June of 2013, the very first area church history advisor seminar was held in Salt Lake City, with 21 area church history advisors attending. The group received in-depth training from church history department staff and had the opportunity to share their area-specific church history plans with one another. A highlight of the seminar was receiving counsel from current church historian and recorder Elder Stephen E. Snow and Elder Jeffrey R. Holland of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. They also enjoyed the camaraderie within the diverse group, connecting with others engaged in their same work and with their same callings, but from other sides of the globe. With a network of church history advisors in place throughout the world, equipped with exceptional training materials and professional support, the charge to collect, preserve, and share Latter-day Saint history is today truly a global enterprise. Finally, my colleague Scott Christensen will share an experience about decentralization.
As our presentation draws to a close, I'd like to share one final story to emphasize the power that church history can have to influence and bless lives. On November 26, 2013, I participated in a quarterly meeting of the Africa West Area Church History Coordination Committee. Elder Terrence M. Vinson of the Second Quorum of 70 presided at that meeting. The meeting originated from the Africa West Area Office Building in Accra, Ghana. Matt Heiss and I joined that meeting via video conference from Salt Lake. A major topic of discussion was an upcoming celebration scheduled for January of this year, January of 2014, that hopefully would do two things. Number one, it would acknowledge and celebrate the 10th anniversary of the dedication of the Accra, Ghana Temple. And secondly, it would in some way honor those early Ghanaian converts who had played such an important role in the beginnings and development of the church in Ghana. As the meeting was nearing conclusion, I suggested that we consider creating ribbons or medallions that could be given to all of those Ghanaians who joined the church in the very first year the church was there, 1978. I briefly summarized the story of the Utah pioneers of 1847, who were each honored with a lapel ribbon and a gold medallion that they proudly wore during the 1897 Pioneer Jubilee celebration. I mentioned that several other early Mormon communities had also honored their pioneers in a similar way. Here we see a ribbon for the Franklin, Idaho 50th anniversary. There was a good bit of discussion that followed. I was pleased to see Charles Sonakori and the country advisor, Fred Entree, suggest enthusiastic support and suggest that this would be something that culturally would really work for the saints in Ghana. Elder Vinson also heartily endorsed the concept. He especially liked the idea of seeking out those 1978 pioneers who were no longer active in the church to present them with medallions and to thank them for the role that they had played as valiant pioneers. He hoped that some, through that attention and effort, might choose to become involved in the church again. Elder Vinson asked the Church History Department to proceed. I quickly designed a medal so that one side could acknowledge the temple's 10th anniversary, while the other side could specifically acknowledge the recipient of these medallions as pioneers of 1978. We had to do a little fundraising because this wasn't part of any budget, and there were a few very gracious and kind people, even some in this room, that made donations that made that possible. We finally had the money together by December 18th, and we needed these by the first week of January. Fortunately, we found a jeweler that was willing to do the final design and cast these, and we got them in the mail. So on January 18th, 2014, just 2 months ago, the medallions began to be presented to some of the 252 people baptized in 1978, or if they were deceased, to their direct descendants. Here we see a few of those recipients. On the right is Fifi Ibra, who was one of those people who joined the church in 1978 and who's remained active through all the years. And on the left, we see Frank Osegre, who actually joined the church the next year in 1979, but his father Clement was the third person baptized in Ghana. Clement had died, and so this medallion was presented to his descendants. As Brother Osegre received the medal and it was placed over his neck, he grasped the medal, brought it to his lips, and kissed it. It was clear that this meant a great deal to him. And indeed, we've continued to get positive responses and reports from Charles Sonakori as they seek out people who have become less active in the church over time and present these medallions to them and thank them for the role they played. Just 2 weeks ago, one of those recipients was almost incredulous and said, "Oh, you still remember us?" Well, Charles Sonakori reminded them that they were not forgotten, that their church still remembered them and valued them. And indeed, if we are doing our job as properly as the Church History Department, we are involved in collecting, preserving, and sharing records that will bless the lives of individuals throughout the world. The decentralization model allows that to be more possible. Thank you.